I'm Amber, 29, and I stood frozen at the entrance of my wedding venue, the rustic barn I'd spent months decorating to perfection. My heart wasn't racing, it had stopped completely. There, in the middle of my dream setting, was my sister Stephanie, wearing my custom wedding dress. Next to her stood Ryan, my fiancé of 1 year, their hands intertwined. The betrayal felt like a knife between my ribs, but strangely, I didn't cry. Instead, an unexpected calm washed over me as I watched their smug faces. What they didn't know was that I had been planning for this moment for weeks, and my revenge would be sweeter than any wedding cake. Before I begin my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to hear more stories about family betrayal and sweet justice. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for how this ends. Growing up with Stephanie was like living with a constant thief. 2 years younger than me, she developed a habit of taking my things before she could even properly talk. My pink stuffed bunny? Hers. My favorite sparkly hair clips? Mysteriously disappeared only to show up in her room. My school art project that won first place? Somehow accidentally destroyed the night before the ceremony. Our parents, Natalie and George, never did much to discourage this behavior. In fact, they often enabled it. Amber, you're the older one. You need to share, Mom would say. Or, Stephanie just admires you so much, it's sweet. But there was nothing sweet about the calculated look in my sister's eyes when she would walk away with something that was mine, her lips curled in a subtle smirk that only I could see. Dad was slightly better, occasionally pulling me aside with a "just let it go, pumpkin. It's easier that way." What he really meant was it was easier for them not to address the actual problem. Stephanie's unrelenting jealousy and their unwillingness to correct it. By high school, the pattern had evolved beyond toys and clothes. Stephanie would suddenly develop intense interests in whatever extracurricular activities I joined. When I made the debate team, she tried out the following week. When I started volunteering at the local animal shelter, she suddenly discovered her passion for rescue animals. It wasn't about shared interests, it was about competition, about proving she could do anything I could do, but better. The worst incident happened during senior prom. I had been dating Jackson Miller for 6 months. He was kind, smart, and genuinely seemed to like me for who I was. Stephanie, a sophomore at the time, spent weeks making comments about how I wasn't pretty enough for him, how he probably felt sorry for me. I ignored her as usual, focused on enjoying what should have been a memorable night. I spent hours getting ready, choosing a deep blue dress that made me feel beautiful for once. When I came downstairs, my parents gushed appropriately, taking photos and telling me how grown up I looked. Then Stephanie appeared, supposedly to wish me luck. She hugged me, whispering, "Jackson texted me last night. He thinks you're boring." I pulled away, determined not to let her ruin this. "Nice try," I said, walking out the door with my head held high. 2 months later, I found out she had been sending Jackson messages from a fake account pretending to be me, saying cruel things about his family and friends. He broke up with me, confused and hurt by my apparent two-faced behavior. By the time I discovered what happened and tried to explain, he had already started dating someone else. Someone who happened to be Stephanie's best friend. Through all of this, I had one constant support, my best friend Caitlin. We met in 3rd grade when she punched a boy who was making fun of my braces. From that moment on, she was the sister I wished I had, fiercely loyal, honest, and supportive. She was the only one who saw through Stephanie's innocent act. "Your sister is a psychopath," she would tell me bluntly. "And your parents are enabling her." "They're not that bad," I'd defend, though we both knew I was lying. "Amber, normal siblings don't try to systematically destroy each other's happiness," Caitlin would point out. "This isn't healthy competition. This is sabotage." After graduating college, I threw myself into building my career as an event planner. It was perfect for me. I loved the creativity, the organization, the ability to make people's special moments unforgettable. I worked my way up from an assistant to running my own small business in just 4 years. For the first time, I had something Stephanie couldn't easily take or replicate. She had dropped out of college after switching majors 3 times, and was working retail jobs while finding herself. My parents still managed to turn this around. Not everyone is meant for the traditional path, Amber, Mom would say. Stephanie is just more free-spirited than you. Translation: Stephanie's failures were somehow more special than my successes. Then I met Ryan Davidson at a charity gala I was coordinating. He was 31, successful, charming, and seemingly untouchable by Stephanie's influence. He was the founder of a tech startup that had recently secured significant funding, and he looked at me like I was the most fascinating person in the room. For the first time in my life, I thought I had found someone that Stephanie couldn't take from me. How terribly wrong I was. Ryan was everything I thought I wanted. Tall with dark hair and the kind of confidence that filled a room, he swept me off my feet with his attention. Our first date lasted 5 hours, dinner followed by a walk along the river, talking about everything from our childhood dreams to our favorite bad movies. He listened when I spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. "I've never met anyone like you," he told me that night, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "You're so passionate about what you do. It's refreshing." The first 6 months were like living in a dream. Ryan brought me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. He remembered small details I mentioned in passing, my favorite flower, peonies, how I preferred dark chocolate to milk, the fact that I was collecting vintage cocktail recipe books. He even tolerated my extensive collection of true crime podcasts, though horror wasn't his thing. "Your brain is a beautiful and slightly terrifying place," he would joke as I explained the latest case I was following. When I introduced him to my family, I watched Stephanie carefully. She was polite but cold, assessing him like he was a particularly interesting specimen. Our mother, predictably, fawned over him. "He's so accomplished, Amber." "How did you manage to catch his attention?" she asked later, as if it was inconceivable that a man like Ryan would be interested in me without some trick involved. But Ryan seemed immune to both Stephanie's calculating gaze and my mother's not-so-subtle digs. He held my hand throughout dinner, occasionally giving it a reassuring squeeze when my mother's comments became particularly backhanded. "Your family is interesting," he said diplomatically on the drive home. "That's one word for it," I replied. "Hey," he said, taking my hand. "I'm dating you, not them. Though your dad seems cool." After 2 years together, Ryan proposed during a weekend trip to the coast. We were walking along the beach at sunset, cliché, but perfect. He got down on one knee, pulling out a vintage-style emerald ring that was exactly what I would have chosen for myself. "Amber, you're the most genuine person I've ever known," he said, looking up at me with those intense eyes. "I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me?" I said yes through tears, believing with my whole heart that this was the beginning of my happily ever after. The part of my life where things finally went right. We set the date for May 15th, a spring wedding at Willow Creek Barn, a restored historic venue with soaring ceilings, exposed beams, and a wall of windows overlooking rolling hills. I threw myself into planning with the same enthusiasm I brought to my clients' events. For once, I was creating something beautiful for myself. The first sign of trouble came about 3 months after our engagement. Ryan started working later, his texts becoming less frequent and more vague. When he was home, he was often distracted, constantly checking his phone with a slight frown that disappeared the moment he noticed me watching. "Just work stress," he would say when I asked. "This new investor is really demanding." Then came the password changes. His phone, which had always been open to me, suddenly required a code I didn't know. His laptop, too, was locked down. When I mentioned it casually, he became defensive. "What, you don't trust me now?" he snapped, before immediately softening. "I'm sorry, babe. It's just security protocols for work. You know how it is with sensitive client information." I did know, but something felt off. The Ryan I knew would have offered to show me whatever I wanted to see, confident there was nothing to hide. Other small changes began to accumulate. He criticized my cooking, though he'd always praised it before. He made comments about my clothes, suggesting I dress more professionally or less frumpy. He questioned my business decisions, wondering aloud if I was really charging enough or if my ideas for clients were too safe. Each criticism was delivered with a smile and a kiss, wrapped in concern for my well-being. "I just want you to be your best self," he would say, making me feel guilty for being hurt. 6 months before the wedding, my entire family came over for dinner. Ryan insisted on hosting, saying he wanted to show off his grilling skills. I spent the day cleaning and preparing sides, wanting everything to be perfect. The evening was going well until I came back from the kitchen and noticed Ryan and Stephanie in deep conversation by the fireplace. They were standing close, too close, and Ryan's hand lingered on her arm just a second too long when they noticed me approaching. Stephanie gave me that familiar smirk before drifting away to refill her wine glass. "What were you two talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Just wedding stuff," Ryan said, kissing my forehead. "Your sister is really excited for us." Stephanie had never been excited about anything good happening to me in her life. From that moment on, I started paying closer attention. The discovery happened on a Tuesday. There was nothing special about the day, no ominous weather, no feeling of dread when I woke up. It was painfully ordinary, which somehow made what followed even worse. I was at home working on seating arrangements for the wedding when Ryan's phone buzzed on the coffee table. He was in the shower, and normally I would never check his messages. But the preview caught my eye. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Wear that black thing I like." The text was from Steph Work, which I knew was strange because my sister didn't work with Ryan. My hand shook as I picked up the phone. It was locked, of course, but 4 unsuccessful attempts later, it occurred to me to try Stephanie's birthday. The phone unlocked immediately. What I found nearly brought me to my knees. Hundreds of messages, going back at least 4 months. Pictures I never wanted to see of my sister. Plans for meetups at hotels. Complaints about me. "She's so boring in bed," one message from Ryan read. "You don't have to tell me how boring my sister is," Stephanie had replied with a laughing emoji. I took screenshots and sent them to my own phone, then carefully replaced his phone exactly where it had been. When Ryan emerged from the shower, I somehow managed to smile and tell him I was heading out to meet Caitlin for coffee. He kissed me goodbye, telling me he had a late meeting that night. A meeting? Right. Instead of going to meet Caitlin, I parked down the street from our house and waited. 20 minutes later, Ryan left in his Audi. I followed at a distance, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. He drove to the Grand Meridian Hotel downtown, valeting his car and striding confidently into the lobby. I parked in the public garage across the street and followed, hanging back near a large potted plant. 5 minutes later, Stephanie walked in wearing a tight black dress, her hair done in the way she knew I'd always envied, loose waves that somehow never frizzed like mine did. Ryan greeted her with a kiss that left no doubt about their relationship. I watched as they walked to the elevator, his hand on the small of her back exactly how he touched me. Back in my car, I finally fell apart. I screamed until my throat was raw, pounded the steering wheel until my hands bruised, and cried until there was nothing left in me. Then I called Caitlin. "I'm coming over," she said immediately. "Don't move." 30 minutes later, I was on her couch wrapped in a blanket, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands as I recounted everything. "You need to confront them," Caitlin said, her face flushed with anger on my behalf. "Tonight. Call them both out." "And then what?" I asked, my voice hollow. "They'll apologize? Make excuses? Stephanie will cry to our parents, who will somehow make this my fault. Then you cancel the wedding and move on with your life," Caitlin insisted. "Ryan is garbage, and your sister is, well, we always knew what she was." But as the initial shock faded, something cold and clear crystallized in my mind. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about a lifetime of Stephanie taking what was mine, of my parents enabling her, of me always turning the other cheek. This was about Ryan, who had looked me in the eyes every day and lied, who had made me feel like I was crazy for doubting him. No, I said finally. That's exactly what they expect. Confrontation, drama, tears. Stephanie wants that scene, she wants to watch me fall apart. And then they get to be the victims of my overreaction. Caitlin studied my face. So what do you want to do? I want to understand exactly what I'm dealing with, I said. And then I want to make them regret ever thinking they could do this to me. Over the next week, I did my research. I discovered that Ryan had been moving money from our joint account, money I had contributed for wedding expenses, into a separate account I didn't know about. Small amounts at first, then larger transfers as the wedding approached. Nearly $15,000 was missing. I also learned that his business wasn't doing as well as he claimed. He had lost a major investor 3 months ago and was scrambling to keep things afloat. He had taken out a second mortgage on his condo, our future home, without telling me. The final piece fell into place when I found emails between Ryan and Stephanie discussing their plan for after the wedding. They would wait 6 months, then Ryan would divorce me, claiming irreconcilable differences. In California, that meant he would likely get half of everything, including my business assets if I wasn't careful. They had already looked into it. It wasn't just an affair. It was a con. And I had nearly fallen for it. That night, I made my decision. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a confrontation now. I would wait, plan, and serve my revenge at the moment when it would hurt them most. If they wanted to humiliate me, they would learn what true humiliation felt like. My first impulse was to simply cancel the wedding. Call everyone, send out notices, return the gifts already received, and disappear to lick my wounds in private. It would be the sensible thing to do. But the more I thought about Ryan and Stephanie's smug planning, the coldness with which they had orchestrated my humiliation, the more I knew a quiet cancellation wouldn't be enough. They deserved public consequences for their actions. My hand shook as I poured myself a glass of wine, the expensive Cabernet Ryan had bought to celebrate booking our honeymoon. 6 months of my life would have been wasted with a man who saw me as nothing but a stepping stone. A lifetime of letting Stephanie take whatever she wanted without consequences. No more. The next morning, I called Thomas Wilson, a lawyer friend who had helped me set up my business. I explained the situation as clinically as I could, leaving out the emotional devastation and focusing on the financial aspects. So he's been moving money from your joint account without your knowledge or consent? Thomas clarified, taking notes. Yes. And I have reason to believe he plans to divorce me shortly after the wedding to try to claim part of my business assets. Thomas let out a low whistle. That's cold. But not uncommon, unfortunately. Here's what we need to do immediately. Over the next 2 hours, Thomas helped me protect myself financially. I moved my personal savings to a new account at a different bank. I gathered documentation of all the missing funds. I made sure my business was properly structured as a separate entity that would be difficult to claim as communal property. What about the wedding itself? Thomas asked as our meeting wound down. It's still happening, I said firmly. Just not the way they expect. Next, I needed evidence. I already had the screenshots from Ryan's phone, but I wanted more. I hired a private investigator, an expense that made me wince but that I knew would be worth it. Within a week, I had photos of Ryan and Stephanie at various hotels, copies of receipts, and a detailed timeline of their affair. I created a new email account that Ryan didn't know about and began contacting our wedding vendors. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, the DJ, I spoke with each one personally, explaining that there would be a slight change of plans for the big day. Most were confused but accommodating once I explained that I would still be paying in full. A few even offered discounts after I shared a sanitized version of what had happened, their sympathy evident. The centerpiece of my plan was the slideshow. Originally intended to be a sweet montage of our relationship, I now worked with my friend Devin, a video editor, to create something entirely different. We spent hours selecting the most damning evidence, arranging it for maximum impact, adding subtle background music that would enhance the devastating revelations without being too on the nose. "This is brutal," Devon commented as we finalized the last segment. "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied. I recruited a small team of trusted friends who would help execute various aspects of the plan. Caitlin would be my point person, coordinating everything on the day. My cousin Alex would handle security, making sure Ryan and Stephanie couldn't simply flee once things began unraveling. Devon would manage the technical aspects, ensuring the slideshow and audio played perfectly at the crucial moment. I spent hours in front of my mirror practicing the speech I would give, working on maintaining perfect composure. No tears, no wavering voice, no signs of the heartbreak I felt. Just calm, collected delivery of facts that would leave no doubt about what had happened and who was responsible. "You look terrifying," Caitlin told me after watching one rehearsal. "Like a beautiful avenging angel." "Good," I replied. "I want them to remember this face in their nightmares." The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. James Whitman, Ryan's business partner, called me out of the blue 2 weeks before the wedding. "Amber, I need to talk to you about something," he said, his voice tight with discomfort. "It's about Ryan and the company finances. Can we meet?" Over coffee the next day, James revealed that he had discovered discrepancies in the company accounts. Money was missing, and all signs pointed to Ryan having embezzled it for personal use. "I didn't want to believe it," James said, running a hand through his hair. "But the evidence is pretty clear. And with the wedding coming up, I thought you should know what kind of man you're marrying." I studied James carefully. We had met several times at company functions, and I had always found him to be straightforward and ethical, the opposite of Ryan in many ways. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Actually, there's something you should know too." I told James an abbreviated version of what I had discovered. His face darkened with each new detail. "That son of a bitch," he muttered when I finished. "What are you going to do?" "I have a plan," I said. "But I could use your help with one part of it." By the time I left the coffee shop, I had another ally, one who had access to even more damaging information about Ryan's business dealings than I could have found on my own. 1 week before the wedding, everything was in place. The trap was set. All that remained was to play my part convincingly until the big day. The hardest part of my plan was pretending that everything was normal. Every morning I woke up next to Ryan, fighting the urge to scream or vomit or both. Every night I kissed him goodbye as he left for work meetings that I knew were rendezvous with my sister. "You should eat something," Caitlin said during one of our secret planning sessions. "You've lost at least 10 pounds. "The dress still fits," I said dismissively. "That's all that matters." The dress. My custom-designed gown with the sweetheart neckline and delicate beading that had cost nearly as much as a used car. I had fallen in love with it instantly, seeing myself walking down the aisle, all eyes on me for once in my life. 3 weeks before the wedding, I went for my final fitting. The seamstress had done an amazing job with the minor adjustments, and despite everything, I felt a pang of sadness looking at my reflection. In another life, this would have been one of the happiest moments of my journey to marriage. I arranged to leave the dress at the boutique until the day before the wedding, not wanting to risk anything happening to it at home. But when I called to confirm the pickup time, the boutique owner sounded confused. "Your sister already picked it up yesterday," she said. "She had the receipt and said you sent her." My blood ran cold. "What?" "Yes, Stephanie, right? She said you were too busy with last-minute details and asked her to get it." I hung up and immediately called my mother, fury making my voice shake despite my best efforts to stay calm. "Did Stephanie take my wedding dress?" "Oh, honey, she was just trying to help," my mother said, her voice taking on that familiar placating tone. "You've been so busy, and she thought it would be one less thing for you to worry about. I want it back. Now. She's not home right now, but I'm sure she's taking good care of it. You know how much she loves that dress." She tried it on to show us how beautiful it looked, and your father said. I hung up again, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. They had planned this all along. Stephanie would show up in my dress, on my wedding day, to what end? To announce their relationship? To watch me collapse in shock and humiliation in front of everyone I knew. For a moment, I considered confronting them immediately, throwing my carefully constructed plan out the window in a burst of righteous anger. But no. That would be playing into their hands. If they knew I had discovered them, they might change tactics, and I would lose my chance at true justice. Instead, I called the boutique back and, in a voice much calmer than I felt, ordered a second dress. It would be simpler than my original, an elegant sheath in ivory that required minimal alterations, but it would serve its purpose. I had it delivered to Caitlin's apartment where Ryan would never see it. That evening, my father called. This was unusual enough that I answered immediately, worried something had happened. Amber, he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I wanted to talk to you about the wedding. What about it? I asked, instantly on guard. I saw Stephanie with your dress today, and something doesn't feel right. She had this look when she thought no one was watching. It reminded me of when she was little, and she'd taken something of yours. For the first time in my life, my father seemed to be seeing the pattern I had lived with for decades. Too little, too late. Dad, I appreciate your concern, but everything's fine, I lied smoothly. Stephanie's just helping with last-minute details. If you're sure, he said, still sounding uncertain. I just want your day to be perfect. It will be, I assured him. In fact, it will be unforgettable. 2 nights later, I came home early from a supposed meeting with the florist to find our condo empty. Ryan had texted that he would be working late again. On a hunch, I went to the guest room closet where we were storing wedding items and began searching through boxes. In one, I found a small digital recorder I had used for planning notes earlier in the year. On impulse, I turned it on and placed it under the coffee table in the living room, then went to bed early, claiming a headache when Ryan finally came home around midnight. The next morning, after Ryan left for work, I retrieved the recorder and listened. At first, there was nothing, just the ambient sounds of the empty apartment. Then I heard the front door open, voices, laughter. She has no idea, Ryan was saying. God, the look on her face when she sees you in her dress is going to be priceless. I still think we should wait until the speak now or forever hold your peace part, Stephanie replied. Maximum drama. Whenever you make your entrance, she'll be destroyed. Her precious wedding ruined, and everyone will see what a psycho she is when she freaks out. Mom and Dad will be so embarrassed, Stephanie said, sounding delighted by the prospect. She's always been their responsible daughter. Wait until they see her meltdown. Just 6 more months after that, Ryan continued. We play the happy newlyweds. I file for divorce claiming she changed after the wedding, became controlling and unstable. And you walk away with half her business. We move to San Diego, and live happily ever after, Stephanie finished. Exactly according to plan. I sat frozen, the recorder clutched in my hand, as they continued discussing details of their scheme. It was one thing to discover their affair, to realize they had been sneaking around behind my back. It was another entirely to hear them gleefully planning my public humiliation, to know that my own sister was actively working to destroy not just my wedding but my entire life. Later that day, I met with James again. We had been in regular contact since our first meeting, and he had been gathering evidence of Ryan's embezzlement from their company. I've got everything we need, he said, sliding a folder across the table to me. Bank records, falsified reports, even emails where he discusses using company funds for personal expenses. It's all here. Thank you, I said, adding the folder to my growing collection of evidence. This will be crucial. Are you really going through with this? James asked, concern evident in his voice. It's not too late to just walk away. I looked at him steadily. They're not just planning to hurt me emotionally, James. They're trying to steal everything I've worked for. Walking away isn't an option anymore. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. Not from nerves or second thoughts, but from a strange, electric anticipation. I lay awake in the guest room. I had been sleeping there for weeks, claiming pre-wedding superstition to avoid sharing a bed with Ryan, and mentally reviewed every aspect of my plan. Caitlin came over early that morning while Ryan was out for his traditional pre-wedding day golf game with his groomsmen. She found me sitting at the kitchen island, calmly drinking coffee. "How are you so composed?" she asked, setting down the garment bag containing my replacement dress. "I'm a nervous wreck, and I'm not even the one getting revenge on my cheating fiancé and backstabbing sister." I smiled, a genuine smile that felt foreign on my face after weeks of pretending. "Because after today, it will finally be over. And they will never, ever forget what happens when they underestimate me." The morning of May 15th dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself approved of what was to come. I woke in Caitlin's apartment, where I had secretly spent the night after leaving a note for Ryan claiming I was staying at a hotel with my bridesmaids, a tradition he didn't question. "Today's the day," Caitlin said, bringing me coffee in bed. "How are you feeling?" "Ready," I replied, taking the mug. "Absolutely ready." We had arranged for the bridesmaids, all close friends who had been briefed on the situation and sworn to secrecy, to meet us at Caitlin's before heading to the venue. They arrived in a flurry of excitement and nervous energy, carrying garment bags and makeup cases. "Operation Wedding Crashers is a go," announced my friend Mia, giving me a fierce hug. "You're the bravest person I know." "Or the craziest," added Devon, who would be handling the technical aspects of my plan. "Sometimes they're the same thing," I said with a smile that felt almost real. While the makeup artist worked on giving me a flawless, camera-ready look, I received a text from Alex, who was already at the venue setting up security. R&S both spotted together at the Marriott. Confirmed their room number. "We'll track movements." I showed the message to Caitlin, who nodded grimly. "Right on schedule. They think you're busy getting ready with us and won't be at the venue until the ceremony." An hour later, my hair and makeup were complete, and I stepped into my second-choice dress, the simple ivory sheath that somehow felt more appropriate for the occasion than my original elaborate gown would have. There would be no traditional bridal photos, no first look with my father, none of the sentimental moments I had once looked forward to. Those dreams had died the moment I discovered Ryan's betrayal. "You look beautiful," said Mia, her eyes filling with tears. "Like a goddess of vengeance." "Save the tears for the ceremony," I told her, though I was touched by her emotion. "We need to stay focused." We arrived at Willow Creek Barn through the service entrance, careful to remain unseen. Alex met us at the door, leading us through the back corridors to a small room that had been set up as our command center. "Everything's in place," he reported. "The slideshow is loaded and tested. James is here with the financial documents. The DJ has the revised music cues. And I've stationed people at all exits to prevent any quick getaways." "What about my parents?" I asked, a flicker of uncertainty passing through me for the first time. Despite everything, they were still my parents, and what they were about to witness would be shocking. "Front row, as planned," Alex confirmed. "Your dad keeps checking his watch and looking around. I think he suspects something's off." "Ryan's parents?" "Second row on the groom's side. They look happy, clueless about what their son has been up to." I nodded, pushing away a pang of sympathy for Ryan's parents, who had always been kind to me. They were collateral damage in this scenario, but I couldn't let that stop me. A text from our lookout confirmed that guests were arriving and being seated. Another message from a different friend reported that Ryan had arrived with his groomsmen and was waiting in the groom's suite, looking smug and completely unsuspecting. At precisely 2:15 p.m., 15 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, Caitlin's phone buzzed with the message we had been waiting for. Stephanie just arrived with the dress. She and Ryan just went into the side room together. "It's time," I said, taking a deep breath. "Places, everyone." While my friends dispersed to their assigned positions, I remained in the command center, watching the closed-circuit feed of the ceremony space. I could see the decorated arch where Ryan and I were supposed to exchange vows, the rows of white chairs filled with expectant guests, the string quartet playing softly in the corner. The officiant took his place. Ryan emerged from the side door, looking handsome and confident in his tuxedo. His best man and groomsmen lined up beside him. The music changed to the processional we had selected together months ago, and my bridesmaids began walking down the aisle one by one, their faces carefully composed to reveal nothing of what was about to happen. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. The music swelled for the bride's entrance, and the guests rose to their feet, turning expectantly toward the back doors. But they remained closed. I watched on the monitor as confusion rippled through the crowd. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, checking his watch. The officiant leaned over to whisper something to him. And then, from the side entrance where Ryan had emerged, Stephanie appeared. She was wearing my original wedding dress, altered slightly to fit her shorter frame. Her arm was linked with Ryan's, both of them smiling triumphantly as gasps and murmurs spread through the assembled guests. It was exactly as they had planned: the dramatic reveal, the shocked audience, the absent, humiliated bride presumably crying somewhere in embarrassment and heartbreak. Except I wasn't absent at all. Taking a final deep breath, I opened the doors at the front of the venue and stepped out, directly opposite where Stephanie and Ryan stood frozen in shock. Game on. The silence that fell over the venue was absolute. Every head turned from Stephanie in my stolen dress to me, standing calmly at the opposite end of the aisle in a gown no one had seen before. Ryan's face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Beside him, Stephanie's triumphant smile twisted into confusion, then alarm. I began walking forward, my steps measured and deliberate. The string quartet, briefed on the plan, began playing a different piece, not the traditional wedding march, but something slower, more dramatic. The effect was theatrical, exactly as I had intended. When I reached the center of the aisle, I stopped and turned to address the bewildered guests. "I want to thank you all for coming today," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I know many of you traveled far to be here, and I appreciate that. What you're about to witness isn't the wedding you expected, but I promise it will be memorable." I turned to face Ryan and Stephanie directly. "Ryan, you look surprised to see me. Did you think I wouldn't show up to my own wedding? Or perhaps you're surprised I'm not crying in some corner, devastated by seeing my fiancé with my sister?" Ryan found his voice, though it wavered slightly. "Amber, what are you doing? This isn't funny how you suddenly want to talk to me after weeks of lying to my face," I cut him off. "But don't worry, I'm going to give you both exactly what you wanted: an audience." I gestured to Devin at the back of the room, who pressed a button on his laptop. The large screens that had been set up on either side of the ceremony space flickered to life, displaying the first image from our carefully prepared slideshow, a screenshot of text messages between Ryan and Stephanie, dated 3 months earlier. "Let me tell you all a story," I continued as the images began to change, displaying more messages, photos of them together at hotels, receipts with timestamps. "It's about betrayal, greed, and 2 people who thought they were clever enough to get away with it." Gasps and murmurs rose from the crowd as the evidence mounted on screen. Ryan's parents looked stricken, my mother had her hand pressed to her mouth in horror, and my father sat rigid with shock. "For at least 4 months, my fiancé and my sister have been having an affair." "But that's not all they've been doing," I said, nodding to Devin for the next set of slides. "They've also been planning to use this wedding as the first step in a financial scam." The screens now showed bank statements, transfers from our joint account, and a recorded conversation from my apartment. You see, the plan was simple. Stephanie would show up today in my dress, causing a scene. I would be humiliated and devastated. Ryan would go through with the wedding anyway, playing the understanding fiancé. Then, 6 months later, he would file for divorce, claiming I had become unstable after the wedding, entitling him to half of everything I'd built. Ryan stepped forward, his face now flushed with anger. "This is insane. You're twisting everything." "Am I?" I asked calmly, as his own voice filled the room from the recorded conversation. Just 6 more months after that, we play the happy newlyweds. I file for divorce claiming she changed after the wedding, became controlling and unstable. Followed by Stephanie's voice, and you walk away with half her business. We move to San Diego, and live happily ever after. Ryan lunged toward the nearest screen as if he could physically stop the evidence from playing. Turn that off. This is all taken out of context. What context would make this acceptable, Ryan? I asked, still maintaining my composure. Please, enlighten us all. Stephanie, who had been strangely quiet until now, suddenly burst into tears. It's not what it looks like. Ryan and we have a connection. We didn't mean to hurt you. Save the performance, Stephanie, I said coldly. You've been trying to take what's mine our entire lives. This was just your most ambitious attempt. I turned back to the guests. But there's more to this story. Ryan hasn't just been betraying me. He's been stealing from his own company. At this cue, James stood up from his seat in the middle row. That's right, he announced, holding up a folder. As Ryan's business partner, I've discovered evidence of systematic embezzlement over the past year. The authorities have already been notified. Ryan's face contorted with rage. He took a step toward me, but was immediately blocked by Alex and 2 other friends who had positioned themselves strategically around the ceremony space. You bitch, Ryan spat. You planned all of this? You've been spying on me for weeks? No, Ryan, I replied evenly. I've been collecting evidence since the moment I found out what you were doing. There's a difference. I turned to my parents, who sat frozen in the front row. Mom, Dad, I know you've always favored Stephanie. You've excused her behavior, enabled her jealousy, and made me feel like I was wrong for being hurt by it. Today, you see exactly who she is and what she's willing to do. My mother's face crumpled, while my father looked years older suddenly, the weight of his failure evident in his expression. Stephanie had abandoned her tears and was now trying to edge toward the nearest exit, still wearing my wedding dress. This is ridiculous, she hissed. You're making a scene over nothing. You always were dramatic. Trying to leave so soon? I asked. But we haven't even gotten to the best part. On the screens, the financial evidence gave way to more personal material. Screenshots of Stephanie mocking me to Ryan, their cruel jokes about my appearance, my career, even my volunteering work. The calculated malice was undeniable. I want everyone here to understand exactly who these people are, I said, my voice finally betraying a hint of emotion. Not just cheaters and thieves, but people who took pleasure in planning to hurt and humiliate me. Ryan's mother stood up suddenly. Ryan Michael Davidson, she said, her voice shaking with fury. Is this true? All of it? Ryan turned to her, his confident facade finally crumbling completely. Mom, I can explain. Don't bother, she cut him off. Your father and I didn't raise you to be this person. She turned to me, tears in her eyes. Amber, I am so sorry. We had no idea. I know, I said gently. This isn't your fault. By now, Stephanie had given up on her escape attempt, realizing she was effectively blocked by Alex's security team. Instead, she tried a different tactic. You're embarrassing yourself, she sneered at me. Everyone will remember how you turned your wedding into a revenge spectacle. How pathetic. No, Stephanie, I replied. Everyone will remember how I stood up for myself instead of letting you and Ryan manipulate and use me. For once in my life, I'm not letting you take what's mine without consequences. I turned back to the guests. I've arranged for the reception to continue as planned. The food and drinks you were promised will be served, and I hope you'll stay to enjoy them. Consider it a celebration of truth rather than marriage. As I said this, the venue staff began opening the doors to the reception area, where tables were set and the band was preparing to play. Ryan and Stephanie won't be joining us, however, I continued. Security will be escorting them out momentarily. And Ryan, I added, looking directly at him, there are 2 police officers waiting outside who have some questions about those company funds you misappropriated. Right on cue, 2 uniformed officers appeared at the main entrance. Ryan's face went from red to ashen in seconds. You can't do this, he whispered, panic finally setting in. I already have, I replied. Goodbye, Ryan. Stephanie, you can keep the dress. It's tainted now anyway. As security began to lead them away, my father suddenly stood up and approached me. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders slumped with the weight of realization. Amber, he said, his voice breaking. I failed you. All these years, I let this happen. I'm so sorry. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I felt tears threatening. I had expected to feel only satisfaction in this moment, but my father's belated recognition of his role in enabling Stephanie brought up a lifetime of hurt I had suppressed. It's a start, Dad, I said quietly. But we have a lot to talk about later. As Ryan and Stephanie were led away, the last image on the screens changed to a simple message: thank you for witnessing my moment of truth. The real celebration begins now. And with that, I walked down the aisle alone, head held high, toward a future entirely of my own making. The reception that followed was unlike any wedding celebration I could have imagined. There was an almost cathartic energy in the air as guests processed what they had witnessed. Some left, uncomfortable with the drama or loyal to Ryan's family, but most stayed, gathering around me with words of support and astonishment. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen, one of my cousins told me, squeezing my hand. You're incredible, Amber. I had arranged for the DJ to play upbeat, empowering music rather than the romantic playlist Ryan and I had originally selected. The first dance I had once dreamed of was replaced by a moment where Caitlin pulled me onto the dance floor surrounded by friends who formed a protective circle of support. To Amber, Caitlin toasted, raising her glass. Who reminds us all that sometimes the happiest ending isn't a wedding, it's reclaiming your own story. Glasses clinked around the room as people called out to Amber. Even Ryan's parents, who had decided to stay despite their son's disgrace, joined in the toast. We're so sorry, Ryan's mother told me later, her eyes still red from crying. We had no idea what he was capable of. Neither did I, for a long time, I admitted. We both believed in someone who didn't deserve it. My own parents' reactions were more complicated. My mother alternated between tearful apologies and attempts to defend Stephanie. She's always been impulsive. She didn't think about the consequences until my father finally silenced her. Natalie, stop, he said firmly. We've been making excuses for Stephanie her entire life, and look where it's led. No more. He turned to me, his expression more serious than I had ever seen it. I failed you as a father, Amber. I saw what was happening all these years and took the easy way out instead of addressing it. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I hope you'll give me the chance to do better. It was the first time my father had ever fully acknowledged the dynamic that had shaped my childhood. The validation, though decades late, still meant something. I'd like that, Dad, I said simply. As the evening progressed, a man approached me whom I recognized as one of the technical consultants who had helped set up the audiovisual equipment for my revenge reveal. Michael Chen had been a friend from college who now ran his own IT security firm. That was quite a production, he said with a smile that brought out the dimple in his right cheek that I had always found charming during our university days. Remind me never to cross you. I laughed, the sound surprising me with its genuineness. Consider yourself warned. Seriously though, Amber, I've always admired your strength, but today was something else entirely, Michael continued. How are you really doing? The simple question, asked with such sincere concern, nearly broke through my carefully maintained composure. For hours, I had been the confident woman who had outsmarted those who tried to humiliate her. But underneath, I was still processing the betrayal of the 2 people who should have loved me most. I'm surviving, I answered honestly. Ask me again in a few months. I will, he promised, his dark eyes warm with an emotion I wasn't ready to analyze. Meanwhile, news about Ryan was filtering in through various channels. The police had taken him in for questioning regarding the embezzlement charges. According to James, who had been in contact with the authorities, Ryan was facing serious legal consequences not just for the company theft but also for fraud related to our joint accounts. Stephanie had apparently fled to our parents' house, where she was reportedly too distraught to speak to anyone. I imagined her crying theatrical tears, already crafting her version of events where she was somehow the victim. For once, I didn't care what story she told. The truth had already been displayed for everyone who mattered to see. As the night wound down, I found myself standing outside on the venue's terrace, looking at the stars that were just beginning to appear in the early evening sky. Caitlin joined me, wrapping a shawl around my shoulders against the slight chill. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked. "I was just thinking that this morning I woke up believing this would be the day my life changed forever," I replied. "I was right, just not in the way I expected." "Are you okay with how everything turned out?" she asked carefully. I considered the question seriously. "Yes," I said finally. It wasn't the happy ending I once wanted, but it was the ending I needed. I finally stood up for myself instead of turning the other cheek. That feels transformative. 6 months later, the legal dust was beginning to settle. Ryan had eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges of embezzlement and fraud, accepting a deal that included restitution, a hefty fine, and probation rather than jail time. The scandal had destroyed his reputation in the business community, and last I heard, he had moved back to his hometown in Oregon, working at his uncle's insurance firm. James had bought out Ryan's share of their company for a fraction of its worth and was rebuilding the business with a new emphasis on ethical practices. He had hired me to plan the company's relaunch event, which had been a resounding success. My relationship with my parents was evolving slowly. My father had made a genuine effort to repair our relationship, including starting therapy to understand his role in enabling Stephanie's behavior. My mother was trying in her own way, though she still occasionally slipped into old patterns of making excuses for my sister. As for Stephanie herself, we hadn't spoken since the wedding day. She had eventually moved to San Diego alone, just as she and Ryan had planned, though under very different circumstances. According to my father, she was working as a retail manager and reflecting on her choices. I had my doubts about the latter, but I no longer felt responsible for her redemption arc. My business had flourished in unexpected ways. The wedding venue had been so impressed with how I handled the situation that they had referred several clients to me, praising my grace under pressure and exceptional crisis management skills. I had even been approached about writing a book about toxic family dynamics and reclaiming personal power, which I was considering. 1 year after what should have been my wedding day, I received an unexpected call from Michael Chin. We had kept in loose contact since the non-wedding, occasionally meeting for coffee when his work brought him to my area. "I'm going to be in town next weekend," he said. "Would you like to have dinner?" Not coffee, actual dinner. The kind that might be considered a date if you're open to that. I found myself smiling. "I think I'd like that," I replied. Over dinner at a small Italian restaurant, Michael and I talked for hours, moving beyond the careful friendship we had maintained into something that felt new and full of potential. He made me laugh in a way I hadn't in years, and more importantly, I felt completely myself with him, no pretense, no walking on eggshells. "I've always had a crush on you, you know," he admitted over dessert. "Back in college, I just never worked up the courage to tell you." "And now?" I asked. "Now I'm brave enough to admit when I want something," he said, reaching for my hand. "Or someone." 2 years after my non-wedding, Michael and I were planning our own ceremony, a small, intimate gathering at a beachside location with only our closest friends and family. No grand gestures, no elaborate productions, just a simple celebration of finding unexpected happiness. The week before our wedding, I received a letter with a San Diego postmark. Inside was a card from Stephanie. Her handwriting was unmistakable, though the tone was unfamiliar. "Amber," she had written. "I don't expect forgiveness, and I won't insult you with excuses. What I did was unforgivable. After 2 years of therapy, I'm beginning to understand the damage I've caused throughout our lives. I'm truly sorry for all of it. I wish you happiness with Michael. You deserve it. Stephanie. I sat with the card for a long time, unexpected tears blurring the words. It wasn't a magical reconciliation, and I doubted we would ever have a normal sisterly relationship. But it was something, an acknowledgement, finally, of the harm she had caused. Maybe, in time, there could be healing. On my wedding day with Michael, standing by the ocean with the people who truly loved and supported me, I felt a sense of peace I had never expected to find. My father walked me down the aisle, his eyes misty with emotion. My mother watched from the front row, making a visible effort to center this day on my happiness rather than her own feelings. Michael's vows made me laugh and cry in equal measure, especially when he promised to always be your partner in crime, though hopefully with less dramatic evidence presentations in our future. As we shared our first dance as a married couple, Michael pulled me close. Happy? He asked. Completely, I answered truthfully. Though not because of this wedding or even because of you, as wonderful as you are. He raised an eyebrow. Oh? I'm happy because I finally know my own worth, I explained. I learned to stand up for myself and demand respect. Finding you was the bonus prize. That night, surrounded by genuine love and celebration, I reflected on the journey that had led me here. What had begun as the worst betrayal of my life had ultimately set me free from patterns that had trapped me since childhood. In losing the wedding I thought I wanted, I had found the life I truly deserved. Sometimes the most beautiful endings come disguised as catastrophes. Sometimes you have to walk through fire to emerge stronger on the other side. And sometimes, when you stop accepting crumbs of affection from those who should give you the whole loaf, you make space for the feast you never knew was waiting. What do you think you would have done in my situation? Would you have confronted them immediately or gone through with the revenge plan? Have you ever had to stand up to family members who consistently treated you unfairly? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if my story resonated with you. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to empowerment. Remember, sometimes the worst day of your life can lead to your best beginning. Wishing you all the strength to stand up for yourselves when needed.